Today on Spotlight on the Arts, Bob Priddy of the State of Missouri Historical Society. Welcome to JCTV, Spotlight on the Arts. It's fall now in the state of Missouri. We're coming to you from the capital city of Missouri, Jefferson City, Missouri. I'm your host, Rick J., with a very special guest returning today. That's Mr. Bob Priddy. He's the president of the State Historical Society of Missouri. So if you will, let's turn and welcome Mr. Bob Priddy to Spotlight on the Arts once again, Mr. Priddy.
Thank you, Rick. It's good to be here.
You were a guest last on February 6th of this year. You're on Spotlight on the Arts, and so much has happened that we talked about and come to fruition in the last, should we say, 9 months. So I'm going to ask you to bring us up to date on the major events that's taken place or planned actually in the future. I know you've got some other things that we're going to bring them up to date on.
Sure.
I believe I'll just turn it over to you and let you share with our viewers those highlights.
Well, thank you. Since we talked to you last, our new building has been completed. Our $35 million Center for Missouri Studies in Columbia has been completed. A magnificent structure. It is one of the most striking structures I've ever seen, and certainly I think outside of the Missouri capital, it's probably the most fascinating structure in central Missouri.
It's so fascinating, inspirational, and you feel at home in a new architectural design. Just feel at home, and I was so happy and honored to attend.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you were there because it was quite a day. We cut the ribbon on August the 10th, the official opening. Mike Kehoe, the lieutenant governor, was there to cut the ribbon with me and the other trustees who were standing around behind us. Governor Parson was out of this country at the time. I think he was flying back from Australia, in fact, as we were doing this event. But we had several hundred people there. I'm not sure how many hundred people we had. It was 1,000 or so, which was more than we had even planned on or thought we would get. But it was just an incredible day, and to see so many people there, to go into this building for the first time. This is a building, Rick, that I don't think I will ever look at as routine. I spent so many years going into our old building, which was in the basement of Ellis Library for more than 100 years. And now we have this building all of our own, our first building of our own ever in our history. And we were founded in 1898, so that tells you how long we've been around. So we now have our own building, and we have our own building where people can go in and they can see part of our incredible art collection. They can go into a library that just knocks my eyes out because we're able to put a lot of things on shelves that people can go get, or that we'll have staff members climb ladders to get for them, that we were never able to get out where the people could see them before because they were all back in the stacks somewhere. We have an art gallery that has twice as much floor space as we had in the old building, but more important than that, we have multiples of wall space because we have portable walls that we can move around and shift around, and we can create new areas for specific displays and things like that. So in addition to our usual Bentons and Binghams that we have that people will remember when they've gone to the old building, we have room for a lot of special exhibits. We have some photography by Oliver Schuchard, who's one of the great landscape photographers for Missouri, and we have part one of his display there right now, and we'll be opening a second part later. We have Thomas Hart Benton's drawings for Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, the illustrated versions he did of those books in the 40s. We have editorial cartoons from the Post-Dispatch by various editorial cartoonists for the Post. Daniel Fitzpatrick's editorial cartoons from World War II are on display there right now. So we have so much more space and so much more room just in the art gallery that we've never had before. So we can show off some of the 30,000 works of art that we have in our collection already. We have some of the largest collections of Bingham etchings and we have some of the largest original collection of Benton paintings. We even have some of Audubon's early folio paintings of birds. I think we have something like 380,000 photographs that depict Missouri history. We have 10,500 manuscripts, including some that are so precious we have them in a special climate-controlled room, even more climate-controlled than usual. One of the things we started probably 20 or 25 years ago was oral histories. And we're now up to about 7,000 oral histories. Many of them are members of the state government, governors, legislators, who recalled the legislature going back into the 30s because they were there and remembered it. And we have that kind of oral history that supplements any written history that we have. And so we have a lot of personal memories that transcend what you're going to read in documents or in even newspaper accounts of things that went on. So we're very rich in that. We have 8,000 maps. Some of them get back to the early 1700s, 100 years or more before we were even a state. But our biggest collection is newspapers. We have 4,600 newspaper titles. It's hard to believe that we have had 4,600 differently named newspapers published in Missouri since the first one in 1808, and we have copies of the 1808 newspaper, which was in St. Louis, and we even have copies of the first newspaper published outstate, which was in Franklin, which is the community that's now long gone up by Boonville. But that newspaper covers the beginning of Becknell's first trip to Santa Fe. So the opening of the Santa Fe Trail, we have that covered in the newspapers. And we can come all the way forward, and especially in small town newspapers, any of your viewers who are from small town Missouri, probably they can go back and they can look through their hometown newspaper and they can find the birth announcement and a wedding announcement and funeral services and all this. It's a treasure trove for genealogists that we have in Columbia. And it's just magnificent that this magnificent building that we have, the Center for Missouri Studies, gives people access to things that we really couldn't show them before. And we have opportunities to do things in this building that we couldn't even have dreamed of 10 years ago or 5 years ago. And we're going to be doing things in the future that we can't even dream of doing now because we have this new building. So it's pretty exciting.
So basically, it's just a treasure of history that is now open to anyone.
From
miles around.
Well, we have a lot of people, of course, from Missouri who come and visit us, but we also have a lot of people from out of state who come in and visit because they're trying to track their family history, or if for no other reason than that. But in many instances, we have scholars who are working on projects because Missouri is the center state. We have as many states to the east as to the west and north as to the south. Right. So we're in the middle of everything. And because we're in the middle of everything and we have these two great rivers, this was the crossroads of the nation as we pushed west of the Mississippi to the Pacific. So everything that happened west of the Mississippi, I can't say everything, but most things that seem to happen west of the Mississippi have some kind of a link to Missouri, and we have stuff in our collection that is helpful to scholars who are looking into that. We have, for example, a diary kept by William Clark before his trip to the Pacific, when he was doing things on the Mississippi. You're familiar with the author William Lease Teat Moon. His wife has written a book about those adventures of William Clark before he went west, and we have. We recently found, several years ago, still during the Civil War sesquicentennial, a man named Rudy Keller in Columbia came across a journal of the Confederate legislature that we thought was lost. Gary Kramer, our executive director, told me that as we were moving everything from the old place to the new place, that meant we had to inventory everything. And so for the first time, we had a complete inventory. And he said we found some things we didn't know we have, and we found some things that we don't know why we have them. But nonetheless, we have them all there. Everything from Helen Stevens' track shoes when she won the Olympics, in '36, gold medal, to the great paintings and the special manuscripts and books and things like that you don't find anywhere else in the state of Missouri.
So it's offered you and your staff, the staff there at the facility, it's also offered you a chance now to research totally new things that wasn't even on the surface.
Well, that's true. You know, it's easier to find stuff now. You mentioned the staff. I need to mention this.
Please.
We started planning this move as soon as we got the funding from the legislature in 2015 to build the building. And so we knew we had to pack up everything and get ready to move eventually sometime. And so our staff has spent the last several years not only just putting stuff in boxes, but putting stuff in boxes in a way and then labeling the boxes so that when we moved into this new building, they could unpack and just put things on shelves in order without having to scramble around, have to put everything in order all over again. And so the logistics of that move were handled entirely by the staff of the State Historical Society, and I just can't say enough about those people and how organized they were.
And they should be commended.
Oh,
and I understand that you did have a dinner that evening or the next day to
we had a dinner before the night before the grand opening to honor our major donors, and then we spent some time especially honoring our staff people too, because we can't run this without our staff. I'll give you an idea of our staff and how committed they are. When we had the recession back in 2008 and the state's economy went in the tank, that meant the state's tax revenue did too, and so our appropriation got cut very deeply. And we were faced with laying off about a fourth of our staff. But our staff said, no, we'll all take pay cuts.
Oh my.
So that we don't have to lose anybody. And so they took pay cuts, and we cut back our days being open. And so they sacrificed so we would not lose the people that we have who do such great work for us. And this was a great thing for our people to do for one another, because they recognize not only the importance of the relationships of one another, but they recognize the importance of the people we have doing the work they do for the people of Missouri. And I just think that that is one of the great stories that doesn't get told often enough when it comes to the kind of people we have working for us and the kind of people who are working for the people.
And now you can see that work.
You can.
It has turned into a great facility. You don't have to be a history buff. All you have to do is have an interest of what ground you're standing on today, or your ancestors stood on at one time. So this is the place, as Mr. Priddy has described. It's just phenomenal and awesome.
It is. It is. It's right on. It's on the north edge of the campus of the University of Missouri in Columbia. It's on Elm Street, just across from Peace Park. And we have two entrances. We have one that faces the city, and we have one that faces the university, because this is kind of a confluence building. Just as we have the two great rivers that come together.
Confluence.
We have town and gown coming together in this building. We have the past and the present coming together in this building. So there's a lot of the confluence theme in this new structure that we have.
Excellent. That could easily be forgotten to connect, but it would take a historian's somewhat of bringing that together as a confluence. Now, there's plenty of parking.
Plenty of parking. That's another thing. We have our own parking lot.
Yes.
Anybody who's watching this program, who ever went to Columbia to the old building, knew that if you didn't get there before 8 o'clock or so and get one of the on-street parking, which I thought charged almost blackmail rates at the meter, if you didn't get there before, so you could snatch one of those spaces, you had to walk about 3 blocks from a parking garage somewhere.
That's true.
And if the weather was bad, that was not pleasant, and especially as many of our people are our age.
Yes.
The idea that they would have to park 3 blocks away and then walk in rain or snow or whatever to get to our facility was not real encouraging. But now they drive into our parking lot, they go in and they get a temporary tag to hang on their rearview mirror to show that they belong there, and they can just walk right in. It's a matter of steps, not a matter of blocks, from the parking space into our building, and we think that is one of the great things that we really have.
And it's easy to find. We'll supply a map even here on the timeline. So.
Yeah, there's a map that shows where we are in comparison to some of the other structures on campus and the edge of downtown Columbia. So it's really an incredible place.
Now, some of our viewers may be asking, is there a fee?
No
admission fee, just come in?
There's no admission fee. there are copying fees and some things like that, but in terms of no parking fees, there's no admission fee to the building. We do have a bookstore; they can buy books there, and we have we have a little snack bar where they can get. Oh, I don't know what you call some of the stuff we have in there, but they get little snacks.
Is it healthy?
Not really, but it's a nice sugar jolt when you start to get a little bit low in the morning. And so we have that. We have a room that will hold 250 people for a meeting, and we are getting a lot of requests to use our building for meetings.
Yes,
not only by the university, but by people in town. So that's another advantage. We have a meeting place that has not been available before in downtown Columbia or on the edge of the campus, because the campus is somewhat limited in some of the meeting places it has now. So they're using us. We can have 250 people in this one room, then we can just open up the doors and fill up another 100 seats or so out in the atrium of our building. The atrium is something that people first notice. Obviously, when they come in, there's this wide open space and this magnificent stairway.
Yeah, so let's talk more about that. And after we come back from a break, if we may, Bob, because the building is just fantastic. Even standing outside and admiring the architectural structure. We'll talk about that architect and the gentleman who actually ran the cruise. That'll be after break. And as you can see, there's just so much more here on Spotlight on the Arts. We'll be right back.
I wasn't always this good. I had a lot to learn. I had to practice. And practice. And practice. Until one day, my dream came true. Sure, it wasn't easy, but it was worth it.
Welcome back, everyone, to Spotlight on the Arts, coming to you from the capital of Missouri, Jefferson City. I continue with my special guest. Returning with us is Mr. Bob Priddy. He's the president of the Historical Society of Missouri. We had a great visit the first right before the break, and now we continue on. If you will, let's welcome Mr. Priddy back.
Thank you.
You know, we talked so much about a lot of the information. Let's continue now along those lines if we can, and the thought process, and that's newsworthy, I guess, content, and dig a little deeper and open up the doors to our viewers on that person who's a history buff, or that individual that you briefly talked about who really wants to get in and dig and doesn't realize all these artifacts, what have you, are there to research their own family. Maybe they come across in a covered wagon on that Santa Fe trail that you talked about. So I'll turn it back over to you, Bob.
Well, one thing that a lot of people do is they either call ahead or they get there and they start asking people. We have a staff that knows everything there is to know about that building. So there's a lot of people who can give them help in knowing where to look for some things. It's not uncommon for somebody to come in and say, I'm trying to find some information about my Uncle Charlie. And we try to find out when they're born, or when they died, where they lived and things like that. And then we can go through newspapers and try to find something if they have specific dates. We can go to various county histories, because every county has a history of some kind there. We have a lot of family histories in there in the genealogical section. So there's just so many different ways that we can try to find information for somebody. We have some open files on specific subjects for people who might know the name of their relative and what they did and be interested in what they did. And so we can give them all kinds of information on what it was like to be a blacksmith in the 1800s, or to be a steamboat captain, or to be a politician or a storekeeper. We have a lot of family records, We have a lot of business records. In fact, I just took up to the Historical Society the other day a big bound volume that is the records of a steamboat that operated on the Mississippi River in the 1860s. And this is one that lists all of the people who shipped things on that boat and where the boats went and what the dates were. And so we have a complete record of this boat now that we never had before. And that's going to tell us a lot about commerce on the river. It's going to tell us a lot about business conditions. There's also some handwritten land lease documents in the back of the book. So we learn more about property and how it was being used and what it was being used for. And sometimes we find this kind of material that helps us understand how property changed hands and how property was used in different ways, how towns grew, how towns were founded and then expanded and so on. So all of these things are up there for people to discover. There are towns that no longer exist, of course.
Oh, sure.
And so if Uncle Charlie's from a town that no longer exists, we can probably locate where that town was because we have all these old maps that show where towns were, where the first railroads went to, where the navigable streams were, where the first highway plans were laid out, where the trails were. So we can probably be able to show people how Uncle Charlie got from point A to point B, whether it was by boat, stagecoach, by foot, or walking, or horse,
train now.
or train. So we can show people how people moved around. We can show people how the land changed and how the land was traded back and forth, and we get an idea of the financial situation of the people who lived back in Uncle Charlie's time in the 1830s, or the 1880s, or the 1920s. So we have all of this kind of information. Some of it is quite separated, so you have to kind of get the different areas and then connect the dots and synthesize everything. Then you have an idea of what it was like to live in Uncle Charlie's era.
Excellent. Now you speak of those things are available, and now where some of us are familiar with microfilm, now we have computers. So what would we, if I'm not computer literally speaking, knowledgeable, someone's going to help you on a computer, or
sure.
we go through a box of papers?
No, sure.
How does that happen?
A lot of we're digitizing a lot of our material now, and that's the new big thing is to digitize, and we're digitizing a lot of our newspapers, an increasing number of our newspapers, but we have digitizing a lot of photographs and other documents, so that you don't really have to come see us in person. There might be some things that are digitized out there that you might look up. But if you come in and you want to look through something, whether it's an old newspaper, our staff is very good about showing you how to thread the microfilm through the reader and how to bring it up on the screen, and how to even block off a column. For example, somewhere in this pile of papers that I brought, I have a copy of a newspaper article that here it is. This is a newspaper article that I copied from one page of a newspaper, talking about what the problem the legislature has in trying to find a place to meet after the Capitol fire of 1911. That's what that's all about. So you can go in and you can actually just pluck one column or one article out of a newspaper and print it out on this, or even put it on a thumb drive. You know, these little portable things, and take that with you. So we can do all kinds of stuff to help you find what you want, and then give it to you in some kind of a form that will be useful to you to take back home and either put in your own files or to refer to when you're writing up whatever you're writing about.
Well, in my 75 years, I've never really ran into that situation where basically it helped. You go in and they say, well, here it is. Open up the file, you scroll here, scroll there, or so this is really amazing in the sense that this is going to be available to you out there just on visiting. Now, I think I want to step into, Mr. Priddy is the president, as I mentioned before, of the Historical Society of Missouri, and one of his chores right now is developing a new book on the state capitol. I think we should talk about that before we lose focus.
There's a lot to talk about.
Please.
Because it's an interesting story that our state capitol's history begins with an illiterate Frenchman who had a Spanish land grant in the early 1800s in the Boot Heel. And that's where the story begins. And so there's a thread that develops off of that. And it goes through the story of some land speculators that were pretty shady. It goes through consideration of where the capital should be when we became a state. They wanted to put it in the central part of the state on the river, near the Osage River, mouth of the Osage. But then they had a commission that went out and looked at possible locations. They picked 3, one of which they couldn't use because the land speculators so badly snarled the land ownership titles that nobody could figure out whose land it was. Another area was what was called Howard's Bluff, which is upstream from Jefferson City, where Marion is, or was. And then the third and the least desirable choice was here, which became the city of Jefferson. And so the story goes through all of that. It goes through various other attempts to take away the capital of Missouri because there were ownership challenges in the courts until the 1850s. The Civil War had a big impact on Jefferson City, not only because we were a target for Price's raid in '64, but because decisions were being made here that affected the whole state and the way the war was fought. We go through the Capitol fires, 2 of them that burned the first government building here, and then the second one in 1911 that burned the Capitol. Even the stories of the year that a Republican won the governorship and the Democrats in the legislature tried to keep him from being sworn in, and they did for 6 weeks.
Oh my.
All the way up to World War II. There's even a discussion of the license plates that we had in World War II, and some of the things that went on around the Capitol and in the Capitol and the capital city, as this was, of course, considered to be a target if the Japanese or the Germans could ever get an airplane this far. So we had to have certain things done here. So not too long ago, I came across the story of Charles Lindbergh in the spirit of St. Louis flying around the dome.
Oh my.
And so that's...
No one realizes that.
It's long forgotten. Yes. But so every time I turn around, there's a new story to tell about the Capitol, and it's going to be in this book if the editors will let me keep it in the book.
Yes.
But I'm, as we record this, I'm trying to finish up dotting all of the I's and crossing the T's on footnotes, and I'd like to get it to the publishers up in Columbia before the end of the year.
That was my next question. What's the timeline? So
well, once I get it to the publishers, it probably will take about 1.5 years. So we're talking having the book come out just in time for the state's bicentennial is what it comes down to in 2021.
Excellent. That's super. Well, we're just about out of time once again. Can you give us an idea where to contact? How would you like the viewers to contact or make contact with the website?
Well, we have a website. It's shsmo.org, State Historical Society of Missouri.org, shsmo.org. That's the easiest way to go to it, and then they can have all kinds of drop-down menus that will point them in different directions. And if nothing else, you can call us in Columbia. The phone number, I think, is also on the web, and we'll be glad to help you out. I think we probably have people who will do some research for you. There might be a fee in addition to what we can help you with when you walk in the door.
Well, that brings up another question. Now, you have all this space for lectures, for studies. Is there a fee? Naturally, someone has to pay the light bill.
Well, there is if you rent one of our rooms for a meeting, yes, there's a fee for that.
Okay.
But yeah, one of the things we do have is we have 2 classrooms that we never had before, and in fact, there will be a Missouri history course taught in one of those classrooms in the spring semester next year as part of the University of Missouri History Department curriculum.
Right. And this is not a little room, darkened room.
Oh, no.
This is glass, 4-sided glass.
Pretty much.
Sitting inside a glass area where you could still take in the view from the front of the facility, looking out in the beautiful park area or the atrium. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah, people need to come and see it. They really do, because it's amazing.
Well, I guess we better close. Do you have any final words you'd like to share with us?
No, Rick, I think I really appreciate the time that you spent with us, because we're very proud of this building, and we want people to know about it. We want people to come and see it. We want people to use it, because it's an extraordinary resource for the people of Missouri to have.
Right. Now, one of your workers, shall we say, or staff is Dr. Joan Stack. Dr. Stack was to be with us last month to talk about George Caleb Bingham and other artists, and so she will be rescheduled and be interviewed. I want to give you that promo ahead of time to look for that interview. Well, Mr. Bob and Mr. Priddy, I want to thank you again for contributing to Spotlight on the Arts and sharing with our viewership worldwide now, thanks to YouTube. It's been really an inspiring time along this travel from getting the building ready this past 2 years. The architectural firm that put it together and your supervisor.
Gould Evans of Kansas City was the architectural firm, and the supervisor of the construction was Gerald Hirsch, who's a Jeff City man, but he is our #2 guy there, and he was at the building site sometimes 2 or 3 times a week just to make sure it was all done correctly. And Gerald did an incredible job, and so we're so proud of him, but we're so proud of this building too.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Well, I have to stop and say thanks to our staff here at JCTV, especially our producer, Gloria Enlow. So, and I want to thank our viewers again for tuning in and watching. So, look for more Spotlight on the Arts right here on JCTV. And don't forget YouTube. I'm Rick J saying, see you next time.